So I thought today for this first video, I'm planning on doing a series, so to keep these videos short, that we would go through just a handful of very popular things to plant in your garden and talk about the different elements. So let's start with onions. Since my camera fell off its stand. So there are 3 different ways to buy onions. You can get them in sets, transplants, or seeds. So sets are just basically little bulbs that you plant, and they have a little bit of a head start, and they get a little bit bigger in a shorter growing season, but you usually only get them in a very simple varieties like red, yellow, or white. And they're pretty easy to buy just about anywhere. You can order them out of a seed catalog, or you can get them at a box store. They're pretty easy to find. Transplants are like the little green plants. They have the green shoots on them. They have the little white onion, and they have roots. And you get them a variety of ways. But you plant them and they look terrible. They look so sad. But that is the way to get the biggest bulbs because they're already growing. They don't have to start from the sets. Sets are already dried and preserved and made so that they will last longer in the mail and last so that you can sell them for a longer period of time. So the transplants are already growing. So you put them in the ground, they're already started. So they grow faster. And you can get a fairly good variety on your brands and types. And then you have onion seeds, and you can get all kinds of varieties in onion seeds. Like you can just about buy any kind of onion you want in seeds, and it is cheaper, but it takes a very long growing season. So if you're just wanting to get little green shallots to chop up and to put into something that don't have a bulb to them, that you're going to eat like the whole onion, then seeds are the way to go. But if you want bulbs, then you have to have a growing season that will grow a bulb because they have stages of growth. They'll put up their shoots of green so that they can absorb the sunlight, and then they'll go into a period where they don't put any energy into their shoots and they put it all into the bulb. So they need enough time to do both. So that's what you have to decide when you're buying onions, is how long your growing season is, what you want your end result to be, and then of course what varieties you want. If you're happy with just having red, yellow, or white, I really recommend the sets because they're practically foolproof. They're the easiest to plant, and you do get a fairly decent sized onion. Nothing huge usually, but you know, a little onion, and they taste good. Another thing that people really like to start with is tomatoes. So there's a couple of ways you can buy tomatoes too. So you can buy them as seeds, obviously. But in my area, the growing season is not long enough to actually get a good sized tomato if you start seeds out in the garden, in the ground, June 1st. They just don't get very big. So I like to buy my tomatoes from my box stores. And I like to get the ones that are, you know, from here to here, somewhere in between there. And I plant them. I usually try to cheat my growing season just a little bit, which is a huge hassle sometimes. So if you're not wanting to hassle, June 1st is a very good starting date in most areas around here anyway. My last frost date is May 15th, and you can look that up on Google as well. Just put in frost date by zip code, go to the Farmer's Almanac, put your zip code in, bam, you'll know when your last estimated frost date is. And then I usually, if I'm telling people to be safe, I say take your last frost date and give it another week and then put your tender plants in the ground. But I try to cheat my season a little bit, and I take half water jugs or half milk jugs when I see the temperature dropping, and I go out there and I cover them. And that usually helps them last. I'm not saying they grow, like they don't get any bigger when it's cold out, but their roots are doing something under the ground on the warm days. So I feel like it gives me a little bit of a head start. But if you are starting from seed, you need to start early. Almost even 2 months early. You'll need sunlight and the right conditions and the right warmth in your house. You can't start your tomato seeds outside unless you have like a heated greenhouse or a temperature controlled greenhouse. But tomato seeds take quite a while to get going. I do have some little tomato seeds that I started in my window. They're about a month and some about a month old now, and they're just, you know, little bitty tomatoes. But I'll transplant them to the garden, and they will try their best. But there's two different types of tomatoes, and this is something you look for on your tags when you're out there in your garden centers or you're ordering online, because some seed catalogs, like this is Gurney's. I've never actually ordered tomatoes out of Gurney's, but I ordered some tomatoes out of E. Burgess the other day, and they are back here. And they are just little plants, just like this. And they came in a little cardboard box, all smashed together, but they were in really good condition for being mailed, I thought. They came early. E. Burgess does say that they try to ship stuff when it's time to plant. But I am still probably 2 weeks out, or 2.5, 3 weeks out from actually planting my tomatoes in the ground, that they'll be safe. But on your tags, on your tomato tags, these don't have tags because they came from online, but you'll have two types. You'll either have determinate or interdeterminate. I have trouble saying that word. And the difference is that the determinate, it's a tongue tire, only gets so big. The foliage on it only grows so large, and it'll put more energy into the fruit that it will bear and its root system, and it's usually a little simpler tomato to get a lot of really good tomatoes off of, but I prefer the other kind. And that means that they will grow, and they will keep growing green foliage, and they will keep getting taller and bigger and putting on more tomatoes the entire growing season. They don't top off anywhere. They just keep on going. And those are my favorite, because I like to try to get my tomato plants to grow bigger and bigger and bigger each year. It's kind of like a little challenge. And I like to get as many tomatoes as I possibly can. So they're not nearly as uniform. You'll get some small ones, some big ones, some lopsided ones usually, because it's not putting a lot of energy into making beautiful small fruit. It's putting energy into making as much fruit and as much plant as possible. So those are the two types of tomatoes, and there are a lot of different varieties. And back again to your growing zone, your garden centers aren't going to carry anything that really won't do well here. A few that I've enjoyed is the beefsteak tomato or the early girl. They're good varieties. Okay, let's move on to a few things that you might plant from seeds. So let's start with like carrots. Carrots are a very small seed, and they take a very long time to germinate. And the deal with seeds for beginner gardeners is that it's very important to know is that so your seeds, in order to germinate and get to the little plant stage, have to stay moist. And they can't be too wet, but they cannot dry out. You just can't let seeds dry out or they will not grow. They just have to have water. Once they get to the little plant stage, then they're a lot more forgiving, because they're not only relying, on that itty bitty little tiny seed. They've also got some roots and way to spread out and find a little bit of moisture. Even through their leaves, they can absorb a little bit of moisture out of the air. That's just how plants are. But that is the main point of any seed, is that you can't let them dry out while they're germinating. Carrots are not something you usually transplant. You don't transplant them. You don't plant them early and then try to transplant them to the garden. They don't do very well because they're very delicate. And when you're planting carrot seeds, I highly suggest that you dampen your soil first. And then either you're planting them in little rows, really cute little straight rows, or you're just wild sowing them into your garden space and you're just tossing them in there. I don't care where the carrot grows as long as it grows. But if you're wanting to kind of keep it a little bit uniform, dampen your soil first. And then put your seeds in and then lightly cover them. Carrot seeds do not need to be covered very deep. Not very deep at all. And the back of your seed packet will always tell you all the information you need to know about how deep to plant your seeds. But what I was getting at is that if you plant your seeds and you need to water them afterwards, carrot seeds are so delicate that as soon as the water hits the soil, your seeds go everywhere. And this is also true for rainstorms. Like last year, I planted my carrot seeds, my lettuce seeds, and my spinach seeds, all beautiful, nice rows. And about the second or third day that they were in the ground, we had a rainstorm. And when those seeds started to germinate and pop up out of the soil, and I could see where they are, they'd all migrated to little piles of where the water had pooled in my raised beds. And I had all my seeds coming up in one place. And it was very inconvenient because they can't grow that close together. You have to thin your seeds in order to get an actual good crop. So that's the basics on carrots. Carrots are very simple to grow. They're very rewarding. They're fairly easy as long as you keep those seeds moist. I'm going to lightly touch on spinach and lettuce, another crop that is really forgiving, really fun to grow. They're easier to grow than carrots because they do germinate faster. Again, very small seeds. There are a lot of different varieties. Like spinach, you can get all kinds of varieties of spinach. But the main difference is that you can get smooth leaf spinach, or I'm going to call it a rough leaf spinach. And then you just need to look at the picture on your seed packet or read the description on the back. And the only real difference is, because spinach is kind of spinach, is that depending on your space, your garden space, how dirty your leaves will be. So the smooth leaf spinach is easier to wash and clean, and the rougher leaf spinach kind of hangs on to the dirt and stuff in your garden. And the same for lettuce. Usually a leaf lettuce is a lot easier to grow than like a head of lettuce. It takes longer for a head of lettuce to become a actual head than it does for just leaves to come popping up out of the soil. And both of those are much tastier harvested young and early in the morning or late in the evening. You don't want to harvest those during the heat of the day because it's hard on the plant. And that's a crop that will keep coming back. You cut it off at the base. So let's say your lettuce or your spinach grows about this tall and you have baby spinach. You just trim it off, make a little bunch, cut it off, and it'll grow some more. And it'll grow your whole season. Lettuce and spinach like to be kind of shaded. A lot of people will tell you that you can't grow lettuce and spinach in the heat of the middle of the summer because it will wilt and it just won't do as well. But if you kind of give it a little shade in the middle of your hottest season, because it's kind of a spring and a fall crop, but you can cheat that. If you give it a place where it can get shaded or put up some shade for it in June, July, August, and you keep it cut back so that it's constantly growing new, you will have a crop from spring to fall. Okay, beans. A lot of people plant beans. You have bush beans and pole beans. Bush beans will be a bush. They'll be about that tall and they will grow a handful of beans. So if you have limited amount of space, bush beans are great because beans are just easy to grow, period. They're a good sized seed. Same with the germination. You don't want to let it dry out, but you don't want to drown it. And then in the pole beans will climb, and they will keep climbing, and they will keep producing more and more and more beans. And they also don't like to get extraordinarily hot, but they can take a lot of heat. So your crop will continue to grow if it's not burning. And it's getting a lot of water. If the temperature is really, really hot and you're giving it enough water to off balance the heat, there's a good chance that you will get a lot of beans consistently for a long time. Peas. Just quick chat about peas. Same thing. You can get little pea plants like the bush beans. They will only grow so tall, and this is something you start from seeds. You don't usually buy pea plants. You start them from pea seeds. But they're the two kinds. Ones that'll grow and grow and grow and grow and up, and the ones that just stay short. Very easy to grow, but they are a cool season crop. They will not produce when they're too hot. So they are something you plant in the spring, you get a crop, and you're done, and you can do it in the fall also. Pumpkins and squash. The simplest things on the planet to grow. No doubt about it. Put the seeds in the ground. They seem to be fairly forgiving. There was a couple of times before they germinated that I didn't get mine watered last year, and I still had a very good pumpkin and squash crop. Very simple. But they send out runners, so you'll need space for pumpkins and squash. They will trail out and take over. And the thing about them is you might have planted them here, so you know. I always put a little flag where I put my seeds because they do spread out so much that you forget where your actual watering point is. But as the season goes on, they will start to grow and grow and grow, and then any part of the trailers that are in a happy moist soil, the stems of that trailer will start to grow roots, and it'll make itself a new little home over here. So you kind of have to water a lot of the area that you're planting your pumpkins or your squash, because they might have abandoned their original where they started for a different energy source that they found that they liked better. But that doesn't happen right away. You can always tell, because you'll like try to move the vines around and it'll be stuck down to the ground. It'll have roots right there. Do a quick talk about potatoes. Potatoes are something you want to buy as seed potatoes. So if you buy potatoes from the store and you bring them home and you've had them for a long time and they start to sprout, there is a possibility that you can make those potatoes grow in your garden. I'm not going to tell you there's absolutely no chance at all, because there is. And the different varieties and the different places they come from, all take in variables. But a lot of the time, the potatoes that you buy in store have been treated so that they will not grow more potatoes. They'll sprout, but when you cut them and harden them, there's a whole process. You can't just stick the whole potato in the ground. A lot of times they won't actually do anything. I had a whole bag of those last year that I tried, and I did the whole process where you cut them and you have eyes in all the parts, and you harden off the sides of your potatoes so that they don't rot, and they had good starts, and I put them in the ground, and all summer long I had rotten chunks of potato that never decomposed in my garden, and it was really discouraging and kind of gross every time I was digging around in my garden. So I highly suggest getting seed potatoes. That's what they were grown for. That's what they are ready to do. They are ready to grow. And if you get those and you keep them nice and moist, they get a lot of sun, you can do really well. You'll get like 10 potatoes from every seed potato that you put in the ground. You usually get about 10 new potatoes. And that is a whole nother subject that we're not going to touch today, about pests. Touch really quickly on pepper plants. Just really quick, they're about the same as tomatoes. If you start them from seed, you have to start early, and you have the whole hardening off process. Peppers are very sensitive and touchy, that I found anyway, and they are kind of hard to get from the windowsill to the garden and to grow and still be happy. But if you get in the pepper plants, the only thing you need to know is that they do need sun, but they also can get too hot. So it's one of those things that you can't put it full sun a day long and 100 degrees every single day. If you do, you're gonna have to give them a lot of water. Try to balance out the heat with the water. But they sometimes, if you put them kind of in the shade of something that, like another plant, like I planted mine alongside my tomato plants last year, not really close, but enough so that when the hot afternoon sun got around, that 2 to 3 o'clock sun, my tomato plants were shading my peppers, and I got peppers all summer long. And the last subject I'm going to talk on is how much sun do my plants need? Well, it'll tell you on your seed packet or your plant tag that it needs more sun, a sun-loving plant, or if it's a shade-loving plant, cool season crop or a hot season crop. Now, nothing will survive on a cement patio backed up against a house that gets all-day sun. It's just, that is an extraordinarily harsh environment for any plant. But again, if they are moist all the time and in the shade all the time, and they won't ever have a chance to grow roots because their roots will rot as they're trying to grow. So it's a happy medium. You have to find a place with well-drained soil because you can't ever have roots sitting in water all the time. So if you're container planting, make sure you have holes in the bottom of your container so the water can escape. It's not beneficial ever to have plants sitting in water because their roots will rot. You'll start off with a great plant and it'll just do poorly. So your water has to be able to go all the way through, but you need to keep your plants watered. You know, it's a medium. You need enough water, not too much water, enough sun for your plant, but not too much sun. You just want to make sure that it's happy. And if it starts to wilt or starts to not do well, then troubleshoot it. Change what you're doing. Move the planter, or change the amount of water you're giving it, or maybe it needs some fertilizer or other topics that we will touch on in other videos. So hopefully this is helpful. I know it turned out to be a little bit long. There's a lot of information to gardening, but I'm trying to make it simple because gardening is really, really fun and it is easy, but it takes a little bit of time to get a grasp on everything, and it's really enjoyable. So hopefully you're starting your garden or your new adventure with plants and are gonna love it. So thank you. Please subscribe and catch the next video.